Shock! Negotiations at the peak. Ukraine will not give up a single centimeter of its land. Zelensky makes a loud statement, calls Putin for one-on-one. Does the dictator have enough courage? Insane advance of the armed forces of Ukraine in the south. Occupiers surrounded. The fiery fist of the AFU will reach everyone. Powerful reinforcement of the front from France. This wonder weapon will turn everything upside down. The weather is no longer an obstacle for revenge. Urgent. Lukashenko has gone too far. Sanctions rain down on the Batka. Karma has returned like a boomerang. The temperature is rising. What happens next? Let's break down what's happening right now. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. Maria Farafanova here with the latest updates. Washington has issued an upbeat statement after high-stakes talks in Geneva. U.S. President's Special Envoy Steve Witkoff declared that there has been tremendous progress in the peace process, words that instantly sent shockwaves through diplomatic corridors. The statement came after trilateral negotiations between Ukraine, the United States, and Russia in Geneva. The announcement was confirmed in a post on X by the U.S. representative.
President Trump's success in bringing both sides of this war together has brought about meaningful progress, and we are proud to work under his leadership to stop the killing in this terrible conflict. Both parties agreed to update their respective leaders and continue working towards a deal.
Meanwhile, Ukraine stands firm, unshaken, unbowed, and unwilling to surrender a single inch of its sovereign land. President Volodymyr Zelensky declared that withdrawing Ukrainian troops from Donbas is simply impossible. The head of state remains loyal to his people. As he put it bluntly, Ukrainians would never forgive such a step. Zelensky stressed that Washington and Kyiv are aligned. Any peace agreement must be put to a nationwide referendum. According to him, if the deal requires the armed forces of Ukraine to simply walk out of the Donetsk region, sacrificing sovereignty and the people who live there, it will be crushed at the ballot box. However, if the agreement merely freezes the current front line, the Ukrainian people would accept it, the president added.
I think that if we write in the document that we remain where we are on the line of contact, I think that people will support this in a referendum. That is my opinion.
Zelensky also declared he is ready to meet face-to-face with the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. The Ukrainian president has instructed negotiators to raise the issue of a personal meeting, a dramatic one-on-one that could redefine the battlefield narrative. He emphasized that a direct meeting with the Russian dictator is the most effective way to achieve a breakthrough on territorial issues. Moreover, Zelensky suggested that presidential elections could be held simultaneously with the referendum, a political move that could reshape Ukraine's future in one decisive moment. According to the president, the fiercest dispute now revolves around the duration of a ceasefire. The opposing side is reportedly willing to hold fire for just one single day, solely to hold the vote. Zelensky called Moscow's position absurd, a gesture that looks more like a tactical stunt than a genuine step toward peace. He stated that fair and secure elections require at least 2 months of silence. Russia's refusal to agree to a prolonged ceasefire, he said, exposed its true intentions. Not readiness for real peace, but a reluctance to end the war on honest terms. The armed forces of Ukraine are pushing forward in south. Commander-in-Chief Alexander Syrsky confirmed that in the Alexandrovsk direction and near Huliaipole in Zaporizhia region, Ukrainian troops are carrying out successful counterattacks. These operations became possible after Russian forces reportedly lost access to Starlink, and the results are already tangible, with several settlements liberated. The first reports of Ukrainian counterattacks at the junction of Zaporizhia, Dnipropetrovsk and Donetsk regions ironically came from Russia war bloggers. Among them was the propagandist of Ukrainian origin Yuri Podolyaka, who described the actions as a counteroffensive by the Ukrainian army and admitted that breakthroughs are reaching depth of up to 16 kilometers, a stunning acknowledgement for the other side of the barricade. According to unofficial sources, on the Huliaipole axis, the defense forces have retaken Ternovada and Kosivtseve, crossed the Haichu River and liberated Dobropilya. Step by step, the map is being redrawn. Reports also indicate that enemy forces were driven out of Priluki and Oleno-Kostantinivka. It is entirely possible that Varvarivka is already under AFU control as well. The southern chessboard is shifting, and fast. Offensive actions are unfolding further north at the crossroads of 3 regions. In recent days, Ukrainian forces have pushed the enemy out of Alexandrovka and Orostopil and advanced toward the administrative border of the Zaporizhia region, reaching the Verbove-Vishneve-Kalinivska line. However, this information remains unofficial for now. Critical developments are taking place near Stepnohirsk. Ukrainian forces appear to have significantly reduced the so-called gray zone beyond the town, regained control of Lukyanivske, and are fighting in Primorske. According to the reports, Ukrainian units have infiltrated the settlement of Plavny. If confirmed, Russian troops in Primorske could face operational encirclement, as both Primorske and Plavny lie in a narrow strip along the coast of the forward Kakhovska reservoir. A geographic trap that could turn into a strategic nightmare. All signs indicate that Ukrainian forces have shifted to active counteroffensive operations in the south. In doing so, they have slowed and possibly completely halted the Russian advance that had posed a serious long-term threat to Zaporizhia. The southern front is no longer static, it is moving, and moving in Ukraine's favor. France is reinforcing the front. Ukrainian drones are set to receive advanced SAR reconnaissance radars from the French company Harmattan AI, a breakthrough that will allow them to see through clouds, fog, and battlefield smoke. The announcement was made by the CEO of Harmattan AI, signaling a new technological leap for Ukraine's aerial intelligence. He emphasized that the company has developed a sensor unique in the world, a SAR radar designed for drones weighing less than 150 kilograms. This cutting-edge system will be integrated into Ukrainian platforms and deployed directly in Ukraine, bringing European innovation straight to the front lines. This is an active remote sensing system that uses microwave radiation to generate highly detailed images of the Earth's surface. In practical terms, it means Ukrainian forces will obtain clear imagery regardless of the weather, rain, fog, day or night. When visibility drops to zero, the radar still sees. When others are blind, Ukraine keeps watching. The company's CEO added that European manufacturers have much to learn from certain Ukrainian systems and producers who have accumulated years of battlefield experience since 2014. According to him, Ukraine has built an industry that evolves weekly and operates in close proximity to the realities and constraints of the modern frontline, a pressure that has forced rapid adaptation and resilience.
Industrial cooperation is often viewed from a mercantile angle. Since some companies sell defense systems and there is a war, one must go and sell them there. Such a rather crude contract is certainly appropriate, both for the Ukrainians and for us. But it is also interesting to gather data and draw industrial and technological conclusions in order to learn what the modern theater of war looks like. This includes, in particular, understanding the constraints of electronic warfare. When you can no longer communicate via radio waves or position yourself using GPS, how do you operate on the modern battlefield?
Ukraine has imposed a sanctions package against Lukashenko. According to President Zelensky, Ukraine will significantly intensify countermeasures against all forms of his assistance in the killing of Ukrainians. Together with partners, Kyiv will work to ensure these measures have a global impact, turning pressure into consequences.
In the second half of 2025, the Russians deployed a system of repeaters to control strike drones on the territory of Belarus, which increased the Russian army's ability to strike our northern regions, from Kyiv region to Volyn. Some of the strikes, in particular on energy facilities and railways in our regions, the Russians would not have been able to strike without such assistance from Belarus. More than 3,000 Belarusian enterprises are put at the service of the Russian war and supply equipment and components that are classified as critically important. In particular, these are components for the production of missiles that terrorize our cities and villages.
The president also noted that infrastructure is currently being developed in Belarus for the possible deployment of intermediate-range missiles, the Oreshnik. This poses a threat not only to Ukraine but to Europe as a whole, escalating regional tensions to a dangerous new level.
Alexander Lukashenko not only provided the territory of Belarus for the Oreshnik. Last year, the country's enterprises supplied Russia with critical components and a mechanical base for this weapon. This continues in 2026. Alexander Lukashenko has long been exchanging the sovereignty of Belarus for the continuation of personal power, helping the Russians circumvent world sanctions for this aggression, actively justifying the Russian war, and now he is also increasing his own participation in the scaling and prolongation of the war. There will be special consequences for this.
A record area of Ukrainian land has been reclaimed by the armed forces of Ukraine in just 5 days. More than 200 square kilometers, equivalent to what the enemy managed to seize over the entire past December. A dramatic reversal of momentum. How was this achieved, and can this pace be sustained? All the details in the report ahead.
Last week, Ukraine achieved its greatest successes on the battlefield in the past 2.5 years. From Wednesday, February 11th to Sunday, February 15th, the armed forces of Ukraine managed to reclaim 201 square kilometers. This was reported by the American Institute for the Study of War. The territory recaptured is almost equal to Russia's gains for the entire month of December. One of the main reasons is that the Ukrainian army took advantage of communication problems among Russian troops.
These Ukrainian counterattacks are likely making use of the recent blocking of Russian troops' access to Starlink, which, according to Russian military bloggers, is causing communication and command issues on the battlefield. Institute for the Study of War.
Ukraine managed to regain control over small settlements along the Yanchur and Gaichur rivers in the Alexandrovsk and Gulyapol directions of the Zaporizhzhia region. This is the largest area of land recaptured by the Ukrainian armed forces in such a short period since the start of the counteroffensive in June 2023.
Apparently, quite a lot of importance is being attached to this operation. This is still not a counteroffensive, but rather an offensive operation of operational tactical scale, and significant forces have been redeployed there.
During the course of counterattacks, the Ukrainian armed forces managed to advance 5 to 10 kilometers into the gray zone and regain control over 12 villages in the eastern part of the Zaporizhzhia region. The Deep State resource reports that the overall pace of the Russian army's advance in Ukraine has dropped to its lowest point in the past 10 months. Russia has not advanced this slowly in Ukraine since the beginning of April last year.
The last time the Russian army captured less than 36 square kilometers in Ukraine in a week was during the week from March 31st to April 6th of last year, according to the Deep State map. At that time, according to the project, 24 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory came under Moscow's control. News agency.
We have created the capability to, in fact, inflict serious damage on the Russian military group and strike at the enemy's operational rear, their rear positions at distances of 20, 30, 40, even 50 kilometers from the line of contact. And this leads to the depletion of the aggressor's forces in certain sections of the front.
In addition to changing the situation on the front and seizing the initiative, Ukrainian forces are constantly striking Russian oil refineries in the rear areas of the aggressor's territory. On the night of February 17th, a strike was carried out on the Ilsky oil refinery in the Krasnodar region. The Ilsky oil refinery is one of the largest enterprises in the oil industry in southern Russia and plays an important role in the production of petroleum products and in supplying the Russian army. Such constant strikes on oil refineries are effectively destroying the aggressor's economy. Successes at the front and strikes on oil refineries are strong cards at the negotiating table. And it seems that the Trump administration is tired of the Kremlin and is ready to accept Kiev's position in the negotiations. Another Trump card is Russia's shadow fleet. The assistant to the Russian president, Nikolai Patrushev, is already openly saying that if a peace agreement is not signed soon, attacks on tankers will only increase.
According to available information, such actions will intensify. Attacks on our ships and cargo will become more frequent. Nikolai Patrushev, assistant to the president of Russia.
So right now there is an excellent opportunity to turn the course of negotiations in Ukraine's favor and conclude peace on Kiev's terms.
The armed forces of Ukraine are bringing Crimea home. As an example, in temporarily occupied Sevastopol, authorities reported one of the longest attacks on the city. The so-called governor of Sevastopol, Razmazhayev, claims that air defense forces and the Black Sea Fleet repelled the AFU assault throughout the night. Allegedly, 24 UAVs were shot down. These are the details, but the very scale and duration of the attack speaks louder than official reassurances. Watch.
Crimea is rumbling again. Explosions at military sites, drones over the peninsula, and Russian air defenses hit. Ukraine is reducing Russia's ability to use Crimea as a military staging ground. But what is this? Just strikes or the beginning of the peninsula's return? At night on February 17th, the governor of Sevastopol announced one of the longest attacks on the peninsula. That same night, the Crimean bridge was closed, with hundreds of cars stuck in traffic jams and trains delayed.
There hadn't been any random attacks on Crimea since the 22nd. All operations were planned and carefully thought out. And now, when strikes are being carried out on targets in Crimea, we view them more in the context, serving as the primary initial line of defense for potential high-value targets in the Caucasus.
Right in the heart of Russian military infrastructure, the Iskander missile depot in Pasechnoye was destroyed by Ukrainian Special Operations Forces.
There are fixed and stationary targets. They are subjected to continuous and unrelenting surveillance, and they are the ones that end up getting hit the most frequently. And then there are other targets like mobile and temporary ones. To calculate, plan the operation, and carry it out precisely. But this is the most difficult task.
First a flash, then a column of smoke. Over the past week, the Ghost struck an anti-aircraft missile and gun system. The Panzer S-1, the Nebo-U radar system, and the BK-16 landing craft. Now all of that is just scrap metal, what's left of such valuable Russian equipment.
The system for monitoring surface and air situations is a key element of awareness at sea and in the air. That's why radar stations are the primary targets. First, there are the radar stations, and second, after them come the air defense systems. After that, the breakthrough of the defenses began.
Now, even well-protected airfields in Crimea are no match for Ukraine. On January 20th, the Jankoy airfield was attacked, specifically its control tower. But that's not all, because earlier, at the airfield in Sevastopol, equipment worth hundreds of millions of dollars was destroyed. In particular, a Russian transport aircraft, which was simply standing there waiting until a Ukrainian drone arrived. Crimea is a key military base and logistics center for Russian forces, and it is from there that attacks on Ukraine are most often launched.
Aviation is important for both sides. First, aviation serves as an element of air defense. Specifically, as part of the enemy's first echelon of air defense. And probably even first and foremost, these are the Russian aggressors who are destroying our cities. Well, and they are getting what they deserve.
Under air defense strikes are radars, airfields, military bases, and naval equipment. This is no longer a one-time action, but a systematic weakening of the Russian military infrastructure on the peninsula.
For as long as it continues that the Russian occupiers launch attacks against our sovereign nation of Ukraine from the territory of our occupied Crimea, it is only natural and inevitable that they will continue to receive a firm and decisive response in return.
Another question is why Russia, for some reason, is not actively protecting even its most important equipment and military facilities. Could it be that their so-called unparalleled air defense can't cope?
They're removing them from Kamchatka, from Sakhalin. From primary, they're hauling complexes that were on combat duty and dragging them to our Crimea. They set them up, but while they were dragging them over, our defense forces struck. They brought them here, set them up, and now we're preparing for the next strike. So, first we need to destroy the new Arctic Gorkas in order for the strike to be successful.
Crimea remains Russia's key staging ground for strikes against Ukraine, and the more actively it is used, the more often it becomes a target. And now the question is not just whether there will be new attacks, but how long Crimea can remain Russia's main military hub.
Putin has created a new intelligence service under his former bodyguard. The Russian president signed a decree establishing the main headquarters of the National Guard troops. Leading the headquarters will be 72-year-old Viktor Zolotov, director of Rosguardia and Putin's longtime head of personal security. All the details about this Kremlin office coming up next.
Putin has created a new special service headed by his former bodyguard Zolotov. I
am proud to serve under the leadership of a man who has once again made our country powerful and great. And I will do everything to make sure that certain individuals do not drag it back to the 90s.
The main headquarters of the National Guard troops will be responsible for maintaining the combat readiness of the National Guard, directing the deployment of its forces, and also conducting intelligence operations.
We need to move forward in order to defend our country. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Expanded internal powers as the main body for terror within the Russian Federation and in the temporarily occupied territories. By the way, they are now starting to form an internal intelligence service, the National Guard's intelligence service. You might wonder, why would internal troops need their own intelligence service? In other words, something completely autonomous is being created.
Decades ago, Putin created the National Guard, which reports directly to him and supposedly for very noble purposes, but in reality to suppress his own population.
The decision has been made. We are creating a new federal executive body based on the internal troops of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. We are creating the National Guard, which will be responsible for combating terrorism and organized crime.
It is truly a formidable and extensive parallel military force, which currently numbers approximately 400,000 active personnel and soldiers. Several heavily armored tank divisions and specialized units have already been officially transferred there. Its direct primary function is, in fact, to effectively suppress any potential internal uprisings or civil unrest within the Russian Federation if it is deemed necessary.
He appointed his trusted associate Viktor Zolotov as the head, who for years led Putin's personal security.
It's clear that your task is to sling mud at everything around you in order to destabilize both the political and economic situation within the country. Before I step over you and wipe my feet on you, I'll put on a show for the entire National Guard personnel.
At the time, Putin claimed that this would help save the budget for the social sector, but in reality, the Kremlin dictator is building up his own army, snatching the last rubles from ordinary citizens' pockets. In
this structure, everything related to weapons, to firearms, is now concentrated. This includes various types of security, the licensing system, oversight of private security companies, and, in fact, the internal troops themselves. We expect that we will be able to increase the efficiency of this work and reduce the costs of maintaining various services.
We will have jobs, and they won't. We will have pensions, and they won't. Our children will go to schools and kindergartens, while theirs will be hiding in basements.
with huge amounts of budget money, the National Guard beats protesters with batons and detains those who disagree with the regime, protecting the Tsar from his own people.
Respect for the rights and freedoms of citizens, for the dignity of every person. I want to emphasize, fighters and commanders, the personnel of the Russian National Guard always carry out their orders with honor. You bear enormous responsibility for maintaining order during mass events, for reliably protecting key industrial and infrastructure sites, and for organizing strict control in such an important area, such as the circulation of weapons.
The situation in Chechnya could develop in different ways, but we all understand perfectly well that Kadyrov himself may not last much longer, and no one knows what will happen after him. Even Kadyrov's army is militarized, and it could also get out of control. This is just one small example. There are plenty of similar, more localized examples all across Russia.
Putin has to expand the security forces because he is afraid that sooner or later he will be held accountable for the war, which has brought only death and destruction to Russia.
This is fear, a very deep fear of Putin's, that Russians will return to Russian territory. Any empire must fight on its external borders. Russians who took an active part in combat operations in the war against Ukraine, who will come home to the heartland of the Russian Federation and actually start engaging in raiding, extortion, forming gangs, people who understand what weapons of any kind are. And of course, to restore order, some kind of counterbalance will be needed.
But an inflated staff and high salaries are by no means a guarantee of complete loyalty. And who knows, maybe the new structure will turn into yet another version of the Prigozhin mutiny.
That's all for now. Stay with us to be the first to know what's happening right now. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon.